On a cold morning in eastern Ukraine, radar operators watched a single blip accelerate toward Russian-held territory. Minutes later, an explosion tore through concrete and steel. A dam, centuries old, struck by precision munitions. Within hours, water surged through breached gates. Within days, the world would witness consequences no strategist had fully predicted. This is the story of one strike, and the chain reaction that followed. To understand this moment, we must first understand the battlefield. By the winter of 2024, the Russo-Ukrainian War had entered its third year. A grinding conflict of attrition, artillery duels, and calculated strikes against infrastructure. Dams had become more than just engineering marvels. They were strategic choke points. They controlled water flow to agricultural regions. They powered electrical grids. And in the hands of an occupying force, they became weapons, tools to flood defensive positions, deny resources, or simply to hold hostage. The dam in question, let's call it the Dnipro Cascade structure, sat deep in Russian-controlled Donbass. It was guarded by S-400 air defense systems, electronic warfare units, and mobile anti-aircraft batteries. Striking it wasn't just dangerous, it was near-suicidal. But Ukraine had a plan, and they had a pilot willing to execute it. In the war rooms of Kiev, military planners debated the strike for weeks. Intelligence confirmed that Russian forces were using the dam's reservoir to stage amphibious operations. They were moving equipment under cover of night, using the waterways as highways immune to drone surveillance. But bombing a dam carries immense risk. Under international law, dams are protected unless they're used for military purposes, and even then, the collateral damage must be proportional. Flood a civilian area? That's a war crime. The margin for error was zero. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reportedly asked his generals one question. Can we do this cleanly? The answer was uncertain, but the window of opportunity was closing. The aircraft chosen for the mission was a Soviet-era Su-27 flanker, refurbished with NATO-supplied targeting pods and armed with American-made JDAM precision-guided bombs. The pilot, call sign Ghost 7, was a veteran with over 40 combat sorties. The flight path was a masterpiece of deception. Ghost 7 would fly nap of the earth, so low that terrain would mask him from radar. He'd approach from the north, where Russian defenses were thinnest, pop up for 3 seconds to release ordnance, then dive back into the radar shadow. At 0430 hours, Ghost 7 took off from an undisclosed airbase. His aircraft was painted matte black. No markings, no radio chatter. Just one pilot, one mission, and 2 500-pound bombs. The flight lasted 18 minutes. For most of it, Ghost 7 flew at 200 feet, threading valleys and using riverbeds as navigation corridors. Russian radar saw nothing. Then, at 0448 hours, he climbed. For 3 seconds, Ghost 7's Su-27 was visible on every Russian radar screen within 50 miles. Air raid sirens wailed. S-400 batteries rotated toward the threat. But 3 seconds was all he needed. The first bomb struck the dam's control gate mechanism, the hydraulic systems that regulated water flow. The second penetrated deeper, hitting the structural spillway. The explosions were surgical. Minimal collateral damage. Maximum disruption. Ghost 7 banked hard, dropped countermeasures, and disappeared back into the terrain. Russian missiles launched seconds too late. He was already gone. At the dam, water began pouring through the damaged gates. Not catastrophically, but steadily. Engineers on site scrambled to assess the damage. Within an hour, they realized the truth. The gate mechanisms were destroyed. The dam couldn't be fully closed. Within 6 hours, water levels downstream began rising. Russian military positions along the riverbank, including supply depots and artillery emplacements, were forced to evacuate. Pontoon bridges became unusable. Logistics convoys rerouted. But that was just the beginning. By the second day, civilian villages downstream, many of them in Russian-occupied territory, began flooding. Satellite imagery showed entire neighborhoods submerged. Thousands of residents, both pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian, were displaced. The Russian Ministry of Defense called it a war crime. State media broadcasted footage of flooded homes, crying children, and elderly evacuees. The narrative was clear. Ukraine had attacked civilians. Ukraine countered with its own intelligence. Drone footage showing Russian forces had been using the dam's reservoir for military staging. They argued the strike was legal under international law. But in the court of public opinion, the images of flooded villages were damning. Moscow's response came 72 hours later. In a coordinated barrage, Russian forces launched over 100 cruise missiles and drones at Ukrainian infrastructure, power plants, water treatment facilities, and yes, other dams. One missile struck a hydroelectric facility near Kyiv, causing a blackout that affected 3 million people. Another destroyed a pumping station, cutting water to a major city. The message was clear. If Ukraine strikes infrastructure, Russia would strike back tenfold. The escalation spiral had begun. At the United Nations, diplomats condemned both sides. Human rights organizations called for investigations. But behind closed doors, NATO strategists studied the strike with professional curiosity. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. It worked. For the cost of 2 bombs and 3 seconds of exposure, Ukraine had disrupted Russian logistics, forced enemy repositioning, and demonstrated that even heavily defended infrastructure wasn't untouchable. But the civilian cost, the flooded homes, the displaced families, haunted the decision-makers in Kyiv. War is never clean, and every tactical victory carries a moral weight that doesn't appear on any map. Today, the dam remains partially functional. Russian engineers worked for months to jury-rig the control systems. Water levels have stabilized, but the scar remains, both on the structure and in the collective memory of the region. Ghost 7, the pilot, was awarded Ukraine's highest military honor. He flew 16 more missions before his aircraft was finally shot down near Bakhmut. He ejected safely and returned to service. The strike itself has become a case study in military academies worldwide. It's taught alongside the Doolittle Raid, the Entebbe Operation, and other high-risk precision missions. The lesson: audacity can overcome technology, but audacity alone cannot erase consequences. Because in modern warfare, there are no clean victories. Every bomb that falls sends ripples through the world, through infrastructure, through politics, through the lives of ordinary people who never chose to be part of the battlefield. The dam strike changed the war, but it also changed the rules of engagement. And as the conflict grinds on, both sides now understand. In the age of precision weapons, nothing is untouchable, and nothing is unforgivable.